Good morning, everyone. As you know, we were recently made aware of the province's plan to cancel crucial funding to the City of Toronto. This concerning news came as a complete shock to all of us. We were not consulted. There was no warning of the province's plan to renege on its commitments to Toronto. We had an agreement with the province, and based on that agreement, we created a plan to restore our fiscal house. Just as we're closing in on our goals, the province pulls the rug from under us. They're trying to force us to keep the land transfer tax. They're trying to force us to increase taxes. They're trying to force us to bring back the vehicle registration tax. Why should Toronto be forced to keep the land transfer tax by the province? Why do we have to bring back the car tax? They also claim they have forgiven a 15-year-old loan to the City of Toronto. Folks, that is simply not true. The city stopped paying for this loan in 2005. The province is well aware of that. These payments have been off our books for the past 8 years, and forgiving this loan has absolutely no impact on our bottom line. The city has already completed its budget forecast for this year. We are now left with a $150 million hole to fill. These are vital operating funds to the city, relies on helping deliver services to the most vulnerable residents. This announcement comes at a time when the City of Toronto is struggling with an $850 million repair backlog at Toronto Community Housing. The province's position that they are treating all municipalities equally ignores the facts and leaves Toronto behind. We all know, folks, Toronto is unique. We are the biggest city in Canada and 5 times the size of any other city in Ontario. Since amalgamation, Toronto has always carried the heaviest load when it comes to providing social services, affordable housing, and shelter support programming. That's why these funds were committed in the first place. The reality is, the City of Toronto struggles each year to meet the growing demands of our massive social housing portfolio. A cut of $150 million will put a serious strain on our ability to deliver these vital services to the most vulnerable residents of this great city. But folks, please remember, these are services that the City of Toronto delivers on behalf of the provincial government. To put it into perspective, the vast majority of this funding is allocated to our Shelter Support and Housing Administration. This funding represents approximately 1/4 of the shelter support and housing spending on social housing programs. A 25% cut to the shelter support and housing budget would have a devastating impact on Toronto's most vulnerable residents. On Monday, folks, I met with the Minister of Finance, ready to negotiate and find a compromise. I made the city's position crystal clear to Minister Souza. I provided the minister with a number of possible scenarios, hoping to find some common ground for us to move forward. I asked the minister to delay the funding cut for 2 years and allow the city to prepare for the impact. He said no. I asked him to at least delay the cuts for 1 year. He said no. I asked him to help offset the lost revenue through other funding options or solutions. He said no. I was extremely disappointed that the minister was unwilling to consider any of the options I provided him. There was no discussion on Monday. There was no negotiation, no constructive solutions. They told me to raise taxes on the backs of hard-working Torontonians. I understand the province is facing budgetary pressures. However, the province wants to balance its books at the expense of Toronto's most vulnerable residents. I will not stand for that. So, where do we go from here? I've asked the city manager to prepare a special report on the impact that the provincial funding cuts will have on this great city. The city manager will present this report as a new item of business at the July 16th council meeting. I want everybody, every single person, to understand the effect these funding cuts will have, so we can start to brace for the impact. The province says we are partners. They want to work with us. Unfortunately, folks, I don't see that. I didn't see it on Monday, and I still don't see how we can be partners. We tried to work out a compromise, but they did not come to the table to negotiate, and this is very, very unfortunate. By removing this crucial funding, the province is leaving Toronto behind and hurting the residents of this city.